Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Corey, and I'm a master's candidate in the Department of Plant Biology and Conservation, a joint program between Northwestern University and the Chicago Botanic Garden. How many of you know what a prairie is? It's quite a few. So then you might know that a prairie is a French word for a meadow, or a land filled with grasses, legumes, forbs, wildflowers, and hundreds of creatures that call these habitats their homes. Prairies are hubs of biodiversity, and in fact, many creatures can only live in these specialized grassland habitats. If you're from the region, you might know that prairies have special cultural, historical, and ecological significance to Illinois. In fact, prairies used to cover 60% of the great state of Illinois. When I was a kid, my parents used to read me the popular children's book, Little House on the Prairie, that told of the early Western pioneers that came to settle the region. The fact that these concrete jungles that we live in today were once rolling oceans of grasslands, as far as I could see, just captured my imagination. Now, in these stories of the early pioneers, they talk about how difficult it was to plow the prairie. But once they did, how rich and fertile the soil was. Now, these pioneers were the first to tear up the prairie, but they weren't the last. From 1800s to 2013, the prairies have been and are being destroyed to make way for the growing needs of our growing human population. So what once covered 60% of Illinois now covers less than 1/100th of 1% of the state. In fact, today prairies are endangered ecosystems. So it turns out that the destruction of the prairie has led to several serious ecological and environmental problems, such as a reduction in the sponginess of the soil or the ability of the soil to seep in rainwater and recharge the groundwater. Also, many plants, animals, and fungi have lost their homes and face increasing risks of extinction. The land has lost some of its ability to pull down carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and incorporate it into the soil as carbon, exacerbating the problem of greenhouse gases that lead to global climate change. And the nutrients that have run off from the more compactive soil have gone into the waterways, creating a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico where no fish can live, and toxic algal blooms in the Great Lakes. Fortunately, efforts to restore and replant prairie are taking off in Chicago. Over 260 public and private organizations and hundreds of volunteers have banded together in a regional alliance called the Chicago Wilderness to help protect, restore, and study these precious natural ecosystems in our region. In many ways, Chicago is leading the way in the restoration of natural areas. But are they really? My research is part of a larger and ongoing study in collaboration with many scientists across the region to monitor the influence and impact of our restoration management practice efforts on these precious natural ecosystems. This collaboration is called the Chicago Wilderness Land Management Research Program. The initiative effectively holds up a mirror to see whether the restoration practices of regional land managers, restoration practitioners, and dedicated volunteers are really working to restore the integrity of these ecosystems. So many scientists in the collaboration are looking at above ground and functional aspects of these natural areas. However, 2/3 of a prairie land is hidden in the soil below ground. So to figure out whether our management practices are really working to improve the integrity of our ecosystems, we're going underground. So these are some of the things we're looking at: nutrients, texture, acidity, bacteria. One of the really cool things we're looking at is the presence of a specialized microscopic fungi that live in close partnership with the prairie plants. These fungi, in exchange for food in the form of carbon, help the plants by using their thin filamentous hyphae to mine the soil to mine the nooks and crannies of the soil for scarce nutrients and water in places that the plant roots can't quite reach. These fungi are very important for prairie plants. Many cannot thrive without them. So this is how we're looking at this question, whether management is helping to improve the soil quality. My research team and I think that soil quality components interact to form a suite of characteristics typical to differing stages of ecosystem recovery, ranging from very degraded on the bottom to very pristine at the top. We looked at prairie sites that had been managed for no time at all, those that have been managed for under 7 or 8 years, and those that have been managed for over 7 or 8 years. And we predicted that the sites that had been managed for less amounts of time would be more degraded than those that had been managed for greater amounts of time. So, is management working to increase soil quality? Well, let me tell you a little bit about what we're finding. Preliminary results suggest that general fungi is increasing with increased management in the soil. This increased management, this includes decomposers and potentially that specialized microscopic fungi I mentioned, which indicates an increase in nutrient turnover and availability to plants. One surprising result we're finding is a more complex and therefore hard to decipher pattern in the response of soil carbon to management. So these are all preliminary data, and data are still being collected and analyzed and processed. So to answer the question of whether management is restoring soil quality, it's really too early to tell. But if it is, it might suggest that the current management regime in Chicago of seeding, burning, mowing, tree removal, and spot herbiciding could be a model for restoration practitioners in other areas of the Midwest and potentially across the globe. If it's not working, it may suggest that the data I'm collecting may suggest modifications to this management regime. For example, remember that specialized fungi I mentioned earlier? Well, what if we were able to take more conservative or fragile species of that specialized fungi and introduce it into new restorations? It might increase and help more fragile or conservative plant species that are associated with that fungi to establish more quickly and to get a leg up in the competition with more weedy, aggressive plant species that tend to take over. By studying the question whether management is working to increase soil quality, we're beginning to shed light on what it takes to recreate these prairies, not just the above ground aspects, but both the above and below ground aspects of the prairies, and therefore of the ecosystem as a whole. This might help us to really learn how to recreate these dynamic hubs for biodiversity, and to learn and practice better ways to manage our surrounding environment, so that we may begin to tackle some of those pressing environmental problems, and ultimately, to make the world a better place for future generations. And with that, I'd like to thank those that have made this possible. Thank you.